Hello, family. I'm Janaya Future Khan, and this is Dark Woke. Just before we hit it, I want to say thank you to all the listeners out there, and a special shout out to the supporters who make this show possible. It truly means the world to me. If you'd like to become a member, our Patreon is linked in the episode right up below. Hello, family. Now, if I were to tell you that the Super Bowl that we had wasn't actually between the Seattle Seahawks and the New England Patriots, what if it was actually culturally the Super Bowl between woke and MAGA? And if that were in fact true, which it is, woke beat the shit out of MAGA. Now, I don't know exactly when it happened, but I feel like you know exactly what I mean and what I'm talking about. Somewhere along the line, right? Somewhere along the line, even though it wasn't said explicitly, right? The New England Patriots, the Patriots themselves became sort of the face or embodied the ethos of like a kind of white Americana, right? I can't explain it because in his baby girl era, single Tom Brady doesn't feel like that at all. But there's something about the enterprise of the Patriots themselves, their complete obliteration of like other teams for years and years and years and years. But the uniformity of it, it almost felt fascistic, and not in the very serious way, but that we think about fascism now because we're living in it. But in that weird way where, you know, there's a ring of truth in it because consumption, sameness, uniformity, blah, 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 right? All of these traditionalism, all of these things kind of coincide, and something begins to sort of represent the ethos. In the same way, the Seattle Seahawks then become the antithesis, right? Even look at Darnold. You know what's so funny? Even though Sam Darnold's last name is Darnold, because it's Darnold, I just want to say Darnold. I can't explain it. There's an apostrophe missing. Darnold just doesn't slap that way. But anyway, even down to the quarterbacks. Okay. So you got Drake May, definitely solid, right? He's this is basically like his sophomore year. You know what I mean? Like he's adjusting, but he's also considered a phenom. And who does he feel like, right? Older than he is. He represents a very particular specific way of doing things. That's not, again, a singular representation of anyone on the team. It's just what these teams come to represent, right? Somewhere along the line, we understood that the Patriots had a white sensibility. The Seahawks have a black sensibility in the same way that we knew that even though, right? Take this Chiefs, for example. Right? They have a black quarterback, but we know that the Chiefs have a very white sensibility. It's just one of those things that if you take a second, you're like, no, that totally tracks, right? It totally makes sense that the Chiefs then became like the Taylor Swift party and team, because that also represents that sort of Americana. But let's go back to Sam Darnold is the quarterback for the Seattle Seahawks. This is a guy that had a very non-linear trajectory. I mean, of course, he's amongst the best. He's a quarterback in the NFL. But when you look at all the teams that he's played for in the past several years, not really demonstrating the potential and ability that so many folks are recognizing now, that tenacity, the ability to sort of read in the pocket, even as he's getting slammed. And he was. You have two defensive behemoths, right, in the Super Bowl. But baby woke won. All right, we saw Sam, working class Joe Sam. He's just a guy like us. But no, they represent this like sensibility, and somewhere along the line that became true. It also lines up with the Bad Bunny of it all. And this is ultimately what we're going to be talking about, because the reactions to like just some sexy queer Puerto Rican man who also happens to be like one of, if not the most famous stars, like musicians, like pop stars. It doesn't really matter if the music is pop past a certain point, right? But it does in this case because the reggaeton, a little bit of dance hall, a little bit of salsa, a little bit of everything is in this. But that's Puerto Rico, man. That's Boricua. That's what it's about. We're going to talk about that a little more because, well, the question is, does it have everything to do with what we've been talking about? Of course it does. Of course it does. Of course it does. Because what is the question, or really, what is the sentiment that's being most communicated by the right and their deranged media, right? He's America hating. He's not even American, all this stuff, which demonstrates their own contradictions. But let me just read. If you weren't sure how to feel about the Super Bowl, let's say you're not a sports head, I'm going to read Trump's statement, right? About it. And then, and then I think it'll clear up some waters for you, because if the most odious, disgusting, ugly person, or one of, actually, the administration is full of them, is like responding this way, it tells you exactly where we need to be. Okay. Because the Super Bowl halftime show is absolutely terrible. One of the worst ever. It made no sense. It is an affront to the greatness of America and doesn't represent our standards of success, creativity, or excellence. I love that in general, Donald Trump can't spell, can't speak English well, shits himself in meetings, is definitely struggling with dementia. And I believe that he has like something, because his skin, at least on his hand, is like rotting right in front of us. Like it's like that shit looks like it's going to fall off the bone. And this is someone that is telling us what culture is, or what does or doesn't make sense. He couldn't say acetaminophen. So I'm going to assume that if somebody like this is saying it doesn't make sense, it actually made complete sense. He goes on to say, nobody understands a word this guy is saying, and the dancing is disgusting. Oh my God, that's so good. They don't watch dancing. They don't know anything. They do the YMCA dance, and that's it. And they don't even do it on beat. It's sad. Anyway, especially for young children that are watching from throughout the USA and all over the world. This show, it's in air quotes, is just another air quote, slap in the face to our country. Who is he quoting? This show is just a slap in the face to our country. That contradicts, like, one air quote contradicts the other, because you're saying this show, but it's not really a show, right? That's what the quotes are meant to infer. And then you're saying is a slap in the face to our country with air quotes over that. That means it's not a slap in the face. The country, do you know that, right? Okay, just checking. Okay. Which is setting new standards and records every single day. It's not. Except for like what is really bad, including the best stock market and K's in history. That has an exclamation mark, and every other like word is capitalized for reasons I'm not sure of almost. There is nothing inspirational about this mess of a halftime show, and watch, it will get great reviews from the fake news media. For one, why do you care if it gets great reviews or not? And also, I thought you said that you weren't going to watch it. You said that you were going to watch Turning Point USA's halftime show. Because remember, you guys, that Turning Point USA, that's now running without Charlie Kirk anymore. They put on their own halftime show, which we're definitely going to be talking about. You would see things about it. It's just that nobody really watched it. So you'd see more. And even the guy who said that he was going to watch it, who happens to also be who that show was for, didn't. He was too busy watching Bad Bunny, like every fucking else in the world, like literally like every other human being on the planet that's interested in this type of stuff. So hold on. He goes, there was nothing inspirational about this mess of a halftime show. And by the way, the NFL should immediately replace its ridiculous new kickoff rule. Make America great again. President Donald J. Trump. This is fantastic. This is a normal response. This is a normal response. Okay. So let me just break down why this man is so happy, just in case for whatever reason you didn't watch it, you couldn't watch it, you didn't feel like it. So what we're going to do, I'm going to break down some of what jumped out at me in the Super Bowl the reactions, what matters about this, because what I'm not seeing in all of this, again, it's like, this is the dunk. This is the dunk, right? We got the dunk. We put on a better show. That's normal, you guys. We put on the good shows. That's what we do. We put on the good shows. It's asking, right? What do we do now? Right? Yes, it was stunning. Yes, it was the story. But the story of what? Of Puerto Rico. How does Puerto Rico line up with today? What is it? Why is it so important? Or is it important that we be thinking about Puerto Rico right now? Or how about the fact that it's like Black History Month, right? And despite the fact that it is a very specific kind of Caribbean identity, of Black identity, and it's definitely unique. It's in its proximity to America. Has its own fully unique history that has everything to do with, again, what it means to be a citizen of the United States, and more specifically, who gets to be a citizen in the United States. And it harkens right back to what era? The Reconstruction era. And I'll explain a little bit once we get through sort of the fucking hilarious reactions and also just the breakdown. So let me just tell you really quick what happened, okay? Because yes, woke won. Woke won. Then we won the night, okay? So let's just break it down. Bad Bunny gets selected for the Super Bowl halftime show. The Super Bowl halftime show's the most recognizable face, if you're not an NFL head, if you don't care about Kraft and those other guys or whoever, the sports owners, the GMs, whatever, you're going to know that Jay-Z plays an instrumental role on forming and shaping the halftime show. That's something that will be significant, later. But we know with the whole Kendrick thing and that big thing and blah, 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 blah. Okay. So it's a big deal. What you're not going to hear me say is it doesn't matter. So from the very beginning, from the moment his name was announced, Bad Bunny, it felt like in America could only be read as a political statement, right? I'm going to be so impartial in my lead up, okay? Because we all know I'm incapable of doing that, but it's just that I just can't wait to get to the very silly responses, okay? So anyway, if you want proof of the fact that it was considered immediately political, of course, the manosphere tried to push this narrative that who is this guy? Who's this guy? Right? Who is this Bad Bunny? And what do you mean he's not going to speak English? Meanwhile, right? This is, again, one of the most famous musicians in and around the fucking globe. Okay. But to give you an idea of how political it was in the eyes of this administration that Bad Bunny was selected, for the first time that I'm aware of, they decided to do, and the they is those in cahoots with the Trump administration and that administration itself, they decided to do an all-American halftime show. Okay, with Turning Point USA. And it was headlined by Kid Rock, which is, for the record, Kid Rock is now about his career and rocks are about the same age. That's Gen Z has no idea how old. Actually, they have no idea who Kid Rock is. They don't even know. They've never even heard of him. They're not seeing Kid Rock. Okay. They're seeing Elder Stone. They're seeing old. They're seeing adult. They're seeing elder, right? That's what you are. And then you're just there's nothing there. There's no substance. There's no thoughts in his mind. What did we get hit with? We got hit with Bud Light commercials. Okay. People went a little crazy with that whole trans thing with the Bud Light thing and everything else. And, how we responded, was it better? It was just we were just more annoying and they were hateful. So it is, to be clear, it's different. Okay. But I didn't see that as significant one way or the other. I saw it as one of these silly things that was turned into something serious. But it is significant, right? Because I do watch all the commercials as well. They tell a story. You've got Shane Gillis, right? And you've got what's Them two are like tight, right? So you got Shane Gillis and Post Malone, and they're doing a Bud Light commercial, and there's a couple other folks in it as well. But those are the normal guys, right? Kid Rock was coming out here talking that shit, and how he was never going to drink Bud Light again. And by the way, that didn't last very long. But it's the fact that that's the most famous person that they could get. Like, they gave Nicki Minaj citizenship, and they probably like wiped her debts clean, but they still couldn't get her to perform. Do you know how down bad Nicki Minaj is right now? Nicki Minaj is so down bad. Like, and typically I'm not this guy, okay? But I'm like, this is like, Nicki Minaj has never been a better option for this side, like the MAGA side right now, because even her husband would be amongst familiar, like-minded folks. Okay, shut up, Future. You didn't have to go. No, you're right. I'm not gonna. I won't. It's too on the nose. It's too easy. I'm just gonna keep it moving. Okay. Anyway, I'm gonna tell you about Bad Bunny's performance. I would love to tell you about Turning Point's their halftime show, their All American halftime show. But I've seen TED Talks that had more dynamic, interesting stage management than what we saw. I just want to be really clear about that, okay? They just put a tent in a place, and then they like just chose anyone who would be willing to perform. And then they said it was about unity. Okay, that's what they gave us, right? This is what we got. Do you understand? Okay, let me tell you what we got. I was like, this felt significant, okay? It felt like a story. You know, you're in a home. The home feels like someone's auntie's house, right? And that's what's in the middle of this football field, right? Surrounding the home are a bunch of street vendors, stores, dancing. You've got good music. It feels like a neighborhood. It feels like somewhere. You know what? It feels like pockets of Silver Lake that I've been in. It feels like, because I've never been to Puerto Rico, it feels like pockets of New York that I've been in, where you're seeing like Puerto Rican culture, seeing Dominican culture. And if you know something about Puerto Ricans in particular, you're like, the way that I love a Dominican and a Puerto Rican when it comes to their flags, boy, hilarious. So much fun. Don't play around. Like, yes. A middle-aged Puerto Rican man. Okay. Shirts tucked in. Bluetooth ready to go. Okay. He's busy. He's working. Like, the flag is in his car. It's on his keys. It's in his locker at work. Like, this is what it's about. Okay. So just, you got to know. So, you know, I'm picking up what's being put down, but then you're getting more, right? And for the record, I'm told that like they're the street vendors were actual street vendors, right? So there was a level of intention that's going into this story. So, and why do I say it's a story? Cool. Because then before you know it, and by the way, these were like human beings in their little bush costumes, but they were wearing, there was representations of cane. Well, what does cane have to do? First of all, for those who didn't know what they were looking at, that's what you were looking at. It wasn't some kind of bamboo or, you're looking at cane fields, because sugar became the monoculture that Puerto Rico was essentially forced into producing as a direct result of the United States. But we'll talk about that in a minute, right? Because what is the story that we need to take away? What do we have to avoid? What made it amazing? What made it weird? Okay, so just one second, Corey. I don't know where I put my notes on. Like where I opened up, because I had it. Here we go. Okay. So let me break it down. We start in the sugarcane fields, right? And this was at one point Puerto Rico's cash crop, right? And what? A source of rampant labor exploitation. Thank you, the United States. Okay, great. Bad Bunny opens up with a song from 2022 Iti mi pregunto. Let me tell you something right now. I've got several things that I would argue I'm better at than average people. But then to make up for that, I can't even try accents. It is the saddest thing in my life. Like, I cannot pick up on another language to save my life. So somebody can help me figure out how to do that without telling me to do Duolingo. I'm game. Anyway. So he opens up his show with this song, and he's walking among these, labor in pavas, and they're chopping up these stalks and these tall plants. And it's almost like you're insulated, like you can't see over, you can't see around. You're just sort of in here because cane can grow quite tall, right? But in that moment, it's also, you're immersed. You're not on a football field. There's no big marching band coming. There's no expansiveness. You are really in the pocket, because in these, like, you know where I felt this when I was in Colombia and Buenaventura, and also in specifically though in Bogota. Actually, you know what? In both those places, there's a density. You know what I mean? Like, there's a density, a high concentration of people, of like, it just felt immersive, you know? And so he's moving through what was once Puerto Rico's cash crop, right? All that cash, of course, a lot of it went to the United States. But you've got, with Bad Bunny, and I want to be clear, I'm not like a huge fan. That's not because I don't like him at all or whatever. I'm weird with the music I listen to. So I feel similarly about Bad Bunny as I do Beyonce, which is an utmost respect for the artistry and the craft and the level of work that's put into it. I'm not necessarily going to listen to the music, but I know what I'm getting of the person and of their approach and of the nuances of storytelling, because even though I don't listen to the music, I do read a lot of what their processes are, or listen to a lot of their interviews and engage in that way. So I engage in a way that's like a little bit the same, but a little sideways. So when it comes to like exuberance or, just demonstrating an astuteness around the craft, and also the geopolitical, ethnic, linguistic realities informing and shaping our understanding of the world, is something that I've found that, Bad Bunny grasps pretty well in his music and engages with, right? So there is some kind of socio-political statement in a lot of what he does, even if it's very subtle, even if it's not the point, even if it's like, non-revolutionary in the strictest sense of the term. Okay. So then you have the Blackout. Okay. Again, it's from 2022, and it is kind of like a resistance anthem. Right. And what is it in reference to? Right. 2017, the Blackout, right? It's like, there's actually a mini documentary it as a part of it's like the video for the song about the inequities in Puerto Rico. So, and then you go further down, and then what happens? You have workers falling from utility poles in a flash of sparks. Now, that was one of the most poignant moments to me, because first of all, it's a brilliant way to tell the story, because those blackouts devastated, in addition to the actual devastation, they devastated all of Puerto Rico for several months following a hurricane. What was it, Maria in 2017? And you might remember that. That was around the time that Naomi Klein came out with Disaster Capitalism, and I remember reading it. I actually need to pick it up again. But I had never heard that term prior to Klein's book, right? So disaster capitalism, and I'll talk a little bit about what's happened and what's happening in Puerto Rico. And I get it. It's like this moment of, my God, how many things are we supposed to hold at once? This is nuts. How are we all supposed to fold in? It's so, like, once we have, and this is what calms me down. I just think it's all part of the same thing, and it's sourced from the same place. And it's as a result of our lack of power. To me, it's always, yes, it can be hard to hold all of the things, but that's only because you should not be holding them. You should be placing them in front of you in this sort of power map, or like rich tapestry of what is happening in the global, geopolitical realities of our timeline. So it's not another thing to hold, it's another thing to place and to understand, right? Because again, how Puerto Ricans are thought of and controlled as American citizens, and I want to be very clear, controlled is a word that I'm using on purpose, again, is directly linked to the Reconstruction era and who gets to be a citizen. Like the reason why, like if I were to tell you right now, the Puerto Ricans are American citizens, you'd be like, yeah, right? Some people might be like, oh, really? But, we know that. What's not as known is that all Puerto Ricans are considered American citizens, but not all Puerto Ricans are allowed to vote in American elections. Right? And it's like, wait, what? Whether or not a Puerto Rican is allowed to vote, and again, a Puerto Rican as in an American citizen, is based on where you live. By the way, I want to be clear that there are Americans who have lived in Europe, lived everywhere else in the world that you can think of, right? They've lived there. They've lived there. And they can still vote. They mail their votes in, right? Doing whatever, if there's a primary that speaks to them and they're, that's where they're registered, boom. But definitely on presidentials, they're like, bap, 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 boom. Okay. If you are Puerto Rican, of a Puerto Rican background, it doesn't matter if you're an American citizen if you live in Puerto Rico. If you live in Puerto Rico, you don't get to vote. If you reside in America and have for a set amount of time, then you're allowed to vote. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting? Much like many of our artists, before we get into the economic and racial realities of Puerto Rico and America's role in that, right? Because again, all of this is related. I just want to do, very briefly though, laugh at the outsized reaction by the right, because this is my thing. I don't speak Spanish, okay? I've tried, I listen, I can infer, there's an OG granny that just runs my block, okay? She just runs it. Where all the cars park, what time our dog's being walked, okay? She was yelling at me because I'm pulling out of my driveway at a wrong angle and my car drags, and she's right. But because I don't speak Spanish, I can't fix it. I just know that there's a problem because she's telling me. Right. And I agree that there's a problem, but we're not getting there yet. We're going to get there. Anyway, she comes and she takes these oranges whenever she feels like it. And I love it. I love every second of it. And you know what? I watched that whole damn 13-minute performance and I didn't get much of a word. Right. I don't understand anything at all of what Bad Bunny said. But my God, did I fucking enjoy myself? Did I understand the story that was put in front of me? I enjoyed the fucking story. It made me think about things differently. It made me realize how many worlds there are on this planet, how incredible that is. It made me more curious about Bad Bunny as a person. That's the normal response to art, right? It's like the normal response to art. Art at its best is elevating the mundane and making us think about things in a much more, in an imaginative way. Honestly, in an alternative way sometimes, but mostly it's just man, wasn't that cool? Didn't that take you on a story? Just I don't know, reading does. But that's not how they responded at all. In fact, right? They went off the rails. Why don't we pull up? Because I do love bringing the Piers Morgan of it all. It is so interesting, again, because this whole race hysteria and race avoidance is so specific to here. And I don't mean that it's not happening elsewhere, but the contradiction of having race inform everything, shape everything, be exactly one of the pillars of what this administration is running on and attacking. And it's not being talked about at all. And the right and their pundits, they try to push that agenda onto other people from the West that would be considered their ilk, like a Piers Morgan, for example. And as we demonstrated with Tucker Carlson, it just falls flat. You just sound insane. Why don't we throw on Kelly talking to Piers Morgan? Corey, please. And then we'll start with there. And let's just hit because we got to go through these reactions. You guys, I've been dying. I have been dying.
I'm sorry, Piers, but to get up there and perform the whole the whole show in Spanish is a middle finger to the rest of America. Who gives a damn that we have 40 million Spanish speakers in the United States? We have 310 million who don't speak a lick of Spanish. This is supposed to be a unifying event for the country, not for the Latinos, not for one small group, but for the country. We don't need a Black national anthem. We don't need a Spanish-speaking, non-English performer, and we don't need an ICE or America hater featured as our primetime entertainment.
Okay, what is the national language, officially the national language of the United States of America?
I mean, English. And there's been a push for many years to make it an official,
you don't have one.
Documented thing.
You don't have one.
If you would have let me finish my comments, I would have pointed that out, that people have been pushing to make it official.
Okay, right, so you're trying to make official.
This attitude that you have right here is why you in Great Britain have lost your culture. You see,
let's pause it right there, right? It's she's doing the exact same thing that Tucker Carlson did, which is, it's so sad and pathetic when adults do like finger pointing. Gosh, she really just went full vulture, you know, and I'm going to let her go on this diatribe in a second, but you'll remember that Tucker tried the same thing with Piers, right? But you have lost your cultural identity, you over there. And it doesn't hit the way that they want. Anytime that they're contradictions, right? Or the precedent, the tradition, whatever it is that these folks are claiming that they're trying to defend, right? I'm trying to defend an American institution. It's about togetherness. I'm trying to defend what is truly American values. And it's, you know, what language does the vast majority of Americans speak? And he goes, okay, well, what is the national language? And then she gets upset. And then he says, you don't have one yet. Well, it's happening. And this is why you have lost your country. It's really embarrassing. It's really embarrassing. It doesn't surprise me that over and over again, we keep getting proof that the people who are most driven to right-wing politics are the mentally unstable and the unsmart. Right? And that's not every person that's either of those things. That's suddenly like these racist ideas. No. They come in lots of ways. They enter in lots of ways. But there's a couple of things I want to champion here. Leftinos. Here's Leftinos. I'm going to remember this one because, again, how do we talk about race without talking about race? That's a great example of one. It brings up why Bad Bunny was such a threat. But what I'm leaving you with and what I want you to think about, right? Because she's like, we don't need a Black national anthem. She's talking about Coco Jones. We weren't even, that wasn't up at all. Like, this is the thing. Black people are going to catch strays no matter what, because the whole thing is based on anti-Black racism. But I find their hysteria so odd. And at this point, it's not enough, but it should be that people not having food on the table, not having money in the bank, having less so than before, less opportunity, less happiness, less stability in the country, that would then lend to, you know, a greater force that was not simply anti-Trump, but anti-racism, anti-fascism. That's not actually what we've experienced. But what I do want to point out is, one, I will be mocking their hysteria for sure, right? But the second part of it comes back to us and where we kind of loosen up the reins. This is one of those moments where we're like, good, things are swinging in the right direction. I'm going to talk to you about why that's so dangerous. But let me let this girl play out. And then, because there's two or three that I have found absolutely absurd, but I pay attention to those stupid little dynamics, right? Like the Leftinos, and that's why you're losing your cultural identity. That's why you're like this. Everything is very racially charged, right? But again, we're not talking about it.
Ceded your culture to a bunch of radical Muslims who came in and took over.
Radical Muslims.
We're not allowing that here, whether it's Hispanic, whether it's Muslim. It's not happening in the United States of America. That's why President Trump was elected. And whether it's Bad Bunny, who is American but refuses to speak English in his performances, or anybody else, we have to keep the Super Bowl, which is a quintessential American event, Football, that kind of football is ours. They call it American football. And the halftime show and everything around it needs to stay quintessentially American, not Spanish, not Muslim, not anything other than good old fashioned American apple pie. There should be a meatloaf, maybe some fried chicken, and an English speaking performer. That's what the Super Bowl.
Like, just sad. Try hard and sad. Can you imagine bragging about culture and it's meatloaf? Like, can you imagine hanging your hat up like you've proven your point about fucking meatloaf? Let's move on to the next. They get gradually more.
I like the Super Bowl not to be an international event. I like it when we kind of all come together as Americans, especially when it feels like the NFL is just using it as a marketing ploy to recruit Latin American audience on the heels of Latin America invading this country. 20 million pouring in, and that's what you see. You see all these foreigners speaking a foreign language with foreign flags marching into the camera like a caravan. Too soon. Listen, this was an open borders moment. Everybody knows it. That's what's going on here. And all the reports.
I'm just going to keep it a buck. Like, do you see how hard you have to work when you lie? Look, listen to how hard they have to work. You know what? Let's just run through them, because they're shorter and they're stupider, and they render me almost inarticulate. Let's go.
But if you want to blame anyone for this, again, don't blame Bad Bunny. He is who he is. Someone most people watching had never heard of before he was booked to do the Super Bowl. He's just another entertainer who got very rich off the American consumer, but then turns around and trashes the country when he doesn't like the president. He's an anti-American radical who canceled his U.S. shows because he's supposedly afraid of ICE. What a phony. Unless, that is, he's worried that his concerts attract violent illegal alien gangbangers or rapists. But again,
so let's just pause it right here, because Kid Rock, the biggest loser, on the celebrity side, has sort of come out. I just want you to hear, though, the duality of their language, right? On one hand, they're mocking, right? But the mocking is to onboard a lot of like bullshit racist thought and ideology. And then there's the fear mongering, right? So both of these are supposed to work for whomever their audience is. They know that there's two activation points that's really going to get them, right? It's either going to be the fear or the hatred. And so why I chose these particular things is that you can hear how they're both demonstrated. One is just like, this is this is a guy that was made popular by the American people. Now he's exploiting. So like, he's exploiting Americans. Like, let me just make it clear. Bad Bunny from the annexed Puerto Rico, where the poverty rate is 43%. So to be clear, the kid that grew up, right, under annexation by the United States is now, because he's successful, exploiting the American people. A successful musician is, but billionaires aren't, right? The billionaires that are literally informing what we see, what we consume, right? That are literally taking the wages that are supposed to be going to the working and middle classes, and then, is instead going to them. This guy actually figures out how to make music in his own culture, right? That's what you guys care about, in his own way. And people decide that they like it. But then in this case, they're just being exploited. Like Americans aren't being exploited when Donald Trump sends out his latest cryptocurrency scam, right? That's not exploitation. That's not when Americans are being exploited. You're not being exploited, right? When globalization stole all of your jobs so that some corporate fucking, bigwigs could have their golden parachute while fucking giving a golden shower just about to everybody else and telling you that it was racism, that's not exploitative. But A guy singing music in his language, loving his culture, that's exploitation. And then to put on top of that these racist dog whistle stereotypes. So again, one is mockery, right? Because they're going for this like hatred, right? You like, I don't want these like nasty, rapey, non-English speaking illegals here. That's fucking gross. Or they're using fear, right? But either way, the point is division. The point is hatred. And it's actually, it makes me so angry because when you think about if you just stop for a moment and think about how stupid these people are, okay? How stupid. I want to be clear about something. The language that I'm using, the choice of Donald Trump being a crypto scam artist, because they all are, it's not just him, right? It is specific to Puerto Rico. It's also specific to American practice. Post Hurricane Maria, and honestly, since 2012, Puerto Rico has attracted a certain subset of people, right? And again, gutted, right? Not allowed to build up its own wealth, but was allowed to essentially have its own government that is just sort of like a face, right? Just a face. It operates like a commonwealth, right? It has its own government, but really we're the ones in charge. Well, since 2012, about 5,000 crypto traders moved to Puerto Rico. Huh. Right? And other rich Americans in real estate, those are wealthy, they've moved over to that island. More than 5,000 people have moved into that since 2012. And it's because those rich transplants only pay 3% in taxes, right? How much do locals pay? 36%. But again, the country is 43%. The poverty rate is 43%, right? So when there is disaster, it's not the same. I don't want to say it's the same, but the practice of disaster capitalism, as we're seeing in Palestine, right? There's genocide, there's, religious, ethno-linguistic realities, the politics of that region. All of that is unique and separate and everything else, but disaster capitalism specifically, and just capitalism, it tends to operate in the same way because it doesn't need to change the rule book. It's like, oh, right, well, this spells, I actually want things to get bad because then when things get really bad and like nobody knows where to go, we can kind of just throw like pennies over here and over here, but then we get to build this thing out here. There's no regulation. We kind of own the fucking government. They're going to do whatever we want, right? And it's like, nobody cares, kind of. I don't have to pay taxes because none of my money is going back to this place. And what the fuck do I do? What do I care if it does? Which is where you end up with people like Jake Paul. The reason why I'm pulling the Paul brothers is, if you know anything about me, you know that I am oddly fond of them. Not for deeper reasons than anything I've said. I prefer and enjoy the company and the experiences of men with casual violence. Jake is a huge boxing fan. He actually has taken it really seriously as a sport, and I am a boxer, and that appeals to me. And Logan went the way of wrestling, but I pay attention to them because they are America. They're a metaphor for it in every way, shape, and form. And so, like anything else, I criticize and enjoy enthusiastically. If I'm consuming something, I want to know how and why, and what the impact is, so that I can choose when it's time to ship those things. And also I can use these experiences as sort of like barometers and also teaching things. So the Paul brothers actually live in Puerto Rico. They live in Puerto Rico because of the low taxes. And what's interesting is, prior to the Super Bowl, Jake comes out and he says, and he's the younger brother, is considered the more radical one in a lot of ways, even though Logan has been scaring me more lately than not. He's like, how he's engaging, who he's engaging with, because these are two very powerful young men in America, whether you choose to know about them or engage with them or not. And they have done America and American media very, very, very well. Very well, which suggests an understanding of the place. And it makes sense. They live here and they translate. So when Jake comes out and he says, I don't support this, I'm not watching it, he encouraged people not to watch the halftime show. So this is what happens. He goes in, he puts in a post on X, right before the show on Sunday, that he would be purposefully, this is all a quote, purposely turning off the halftime show. And then he called for his followers to rally together and do the same. He said, turn off this halftime, a fake American citizen performing who publicly hates America. I cannot support that. Right? Of course, the post was immediately tagged with a community note that Puerto Ricans are, in fact, U.S. citizens. And again, he lives in Puerto Rico. So interestingly enough, Logan Paul, who had gone so far as to tell Fox News that he was not looking forward to the halftime show, right? So Logan Paul is the older brother, the one that you see all the time on WWE. So he's the one who's going to be most brand focused, right? He stands to lose the most with his brands because he's in a much more mainstream way than Jake in terms of continuity. WWE, his prime drinks, like his brand integrity up to a point really matters, right? And again, both of them have been accused a number of times of crypto pump and dumps, right? And it's like, yeah, crypto's a Ponzi scheme. And they can keep making money off the base of people that they exploit. And those people want to be exploited. There should be protections against that. There aren't, but I'm like, at this point, you're the problem. If you just keep, but they're going to, they've done their own host of pumping up. So Logan Paul goes from saying, I'm not looking forward to it, right? To after Jake puts out the statement, Logan then says in the same place, I love my brother, but I don't agree with this. Puerto Ricans are Americans, and I'm happy they were given the opportunity to showcase the talent that comes from the island. Then that little bitch, Jake Paul, who typically does not do stuff like this, walks back. He then claims that the word fake in his tweet is being, quote, misrepresented. No, it's not. It was actually being taken seriously. He's not a fake citizen, obviously, because he's Puerto Rican, and I love Puerto Rico and all Americans who support the country, Jake wrote. More so, Bunny is fake because of his values and criticism of our great country. And then he had to defend himself even harder, right, in another post because people weren't putting up with this shit, right? And then he says that he claims to be a huge fan of Puerto Rico, right? He goes, to clarify, I wasn't calling anyone a fake citizen because they're from Puerto Rico. I live in Puerto Rico and I love Puerto Rico. I have used my platform to support Puerto Rico time and time again and will always do so. And pause for a second. Here's the thing. Jake has done a really great job of putting on any women's boxers, particularly, the fucking whole, was it Katie versus, oh my God, I can't remember. I can't believe that I'm not remember. Amanda Serrano. Serrano, a phenomenal boxer, would not have gotten the play that she's gotten if it wasn't for her relationship to Jake and if it wasn't her relationship to her own, Puerto Rican Latino identity, right? So things are always more complicated than we want them to be because Amanda Serrano, and by the way, I'm not trying to suggest that it's not strategic, that MVP Promotions at Jake's company sort of plays that game, but it's the difference between actually being able to point to something and saying, well, this is a counter to the point that, well, Jake might just be a blanket racist. And by the way, no one is saying that over here. I don't say things I can't prove. I also I'm not interested in personal accusations. I'm like, if it doesn't build power, what the fuck do I care at this stage? But they do a due diligence where it's like they have complicated thoughts and feelings about things, but they have relationships, whereas most liberals actually don't have relationships at all to anybody that they claim to, support or whose rights they claim to support. We never have the rights, but in the case with a lot of the folks that are presumed to be racist because they're just white guys who happen to be friends with a huge swath of people, actually have more relationships with Black or Latino people than the average liberal. That's been a major observation of mine, at least when it comes to comedy and entertainment. But it is significant that he had to walk it back, right? But because he goes on to say, so again, he goes, I love Puerto Rico. I live in Puerto Rico. I love Puerto Rico. I've used my platform to support Puerto Rico time and time again and will always do so. I bring up the Amanda Serrano of it because there's grounds to say that that's true. Amanda Serrano wasn't making the kind of money that she deserved to make as a woman boxer who also happened to be Puerto Rican. It was because of MVP Promotions backing her and really championing that three-fight trilogy between Amanda Serrano and Katie Taylor that brought her to another level. It really should have been much more contested. I think Serrano won minimum one of those fights, but that's just me. But then he goes on to say, Jake, if you're publicly criticizing ICE who are doing their job and openly hating America, I'm going to speak on it, period. Which is so stupid, because what are you even talking about? He then dug in harder on what he meant by calling Bad Bunny a, quote, a fake American citizen in his initial post. If you benefit from a country and the platform it gives you, but publicly disrespect it at the same time, that's what I mean by being a fake citizen. There's something in this that I'm going to do something with, but I don't know what. And it's related to all of this, which is, because we're talking about the Negro problem. I'm writing this down for me. I have to be honest with you. The Negro problem. I wanted a little bit more time to cook. There's something that my brain is trying to work through. So it almost feels like I have a reduced mental capacity today where I'm coming in with like 15%. So if you're feeling anything, it's that, but don't worry about it. But there's something in this Negro problem and the who gets to be American, and then what criticisms, because there's something here, right, that I've heard a couple of times. You benefit from being here, right? Hold on, I'm writing this down. You benefit from being here. Like, you benefit from controlling the platform and the platform it gives you. Do you know what? There's something in that, right? Like, the platform it gives you, you benefit from being here. You should be grateful for being here. And you have the audacity to criticize it. That's something that you don't hear when white people are criticizing America. There's something in that. And it's not the obvious thing. I see the obvious thing already. I mean, there's something deeper and more insidious to that I can't quite put my finger on, that I'm working through. But anyway, and of course, this was quite the saga, because by Monday morning, this guy had changed his tune again, right? He goes, guys, I love Bad Bunny. I don't know what happened on my Twitter last night. Question mark, what the fuck? Do you get what I'm trying to say? And then shortly after that, he goes on to like cheering the speed skater, an American speed skater. No, a Dutch speed skater, y'all, not even an American one. Okay. So what does that say? What does all of that say, right? What does all of that say? Right as I'm putting a pin in that, and by a pin, I actually mean I'm literally about to go in on it. Can we just play our final clips with Kid Rock? Corey, please, because that's just perfect, right?
So he goes like, well, maybe Jay-Z will do it, which nothing against Jay-Z. I respect him for his hustle and, his music. But it seems like there's a little bit of a DEI hire there going on, to kind of like, black guys love Jay-Z. And of course, I'm not that ignorant. I know a lot of us love Jay-Z, not just black guys. But in the league where he had this problem, it seemed like, we'll bring him in. And so, Jay-Z's not going to take that position of power and that money. So, then they convened in a not for profit league until, they quietly got rid of that tax exempt status at some point. So Roger did not have to disclose his salary. So he had all sorts of problems.
Have you ever seen somebody have a class analysis and then it just stops with racism? Like, which side are you on? And then to call Jay-Z a billionaire, a diversity hire. A diversity hire. This is syphilis of the brain. This is nuts. Now, this is what I mean when I say I wouldn't be a benevolent God. But there is so much there. But that's the thing that happens, right? You have some kind of analysis where you're saying, well, this is just the powers that be trying to manipulate, but then the manipulation is not, this is actually going to make a lot of money because of how this little culture thing is set up, or it's actually just going to make a lot of money because this is one of the largest, most famous, most celebrated, most well-known musicians of all time. And right now, it's like, no, this is because he's trying to get a tax exempt status, but that, because he don't want to tell us how much he's making. But then he brings in Jay-Z, and it's like, what does that have to do with what you don't even make any sense. I'm not even going to get into this because every time I do, I try to rationalize with it or reason with it. It's very silly. But just think of the audacity, right? Even a billionaire can be a diversity hire. Even a fucking billionaire can be a diversity hire if he's black. I just needed you to hear how stupid that is, right? But he does speak to something that I do think is interesting. Okay. So all of these things that I've said are correct in terms of like the artistry. And I just enjoyed it. I don't think I finished my thought about the granny, but like, I don't know what, oh no, I did actually. I don't know what she's saying. I don't know what people be saying when I go in and I need to go get me some edge control in the Korean spots, because they're the ones who sell black hair products here in Los Angeles because, well, it's a racket. They actually own so much of black hair beauty supply stores because black people weren't allowed to do it. And now on a wholesale level, which represents the make or break of any black hair products, because it's a multi-billion dollar industry. They get priced out or isolated because Korean people who own wholesale manufacturing won't actually give them deals. They won't look out for them in the same ways. And there's a lot documented on this, but it's one of those things not spoken about, right? So when I go into those stores, I know all of the background. I know what I'm entering. I know what I'm participating in. And again, inconvenience is good. You go out of your way sometimes, and sometimes you don't, and it's whatever, but it's so important to know what you're engaging in. But I've never felt hostility towards Koreans. And I know them nignogs be talking shit sometimes when I'm in the store. It doesn't make me feel weird about all Koreans. It's also okay if somebody's talking shit about me in a store. If it's impacting me in some way, you're going to hear it. But it's not my business. It's really just not. It doesn't offend me. My point is, I guess what I'm trying to say is, even as black people, you think that we don't know that you're talking shit all the time? When we're there, you be talking shit sometimes. We know. And still there's no, but them over there, fuck those types of people. Fuck these types. That is not something that's not the conclusion that's drawn. So the funny thing is all this, like, they're not even speaking English. I'm like, what do y'all get so offended about? Like, why does it bother you so much? It's weird to me that it incites that much, but there's something more but this is the thing I'm concerned with, right? Because, the pulse of it all, and I'm going to wrap here because I got to go think my thoughts so that we hit the ground running tomorrow. But the thing that really gets me is the part about us, right? We have to be so careful. Because this feels like a win, doesn't it? And in a way it is, like, culturally, like, for our eyes and for our ears, and it lets a little bit of the pressure off and you're like, whew, right? But it's something that I've noticed with Americans. I'm not the first person to think about this. I'm definitely not the first person to write it up, but like, there's something that's happening. I saw it with Palestine. I saw it again with Venezuela. I'm seeing it with Puerto Rico, and I'm seeing it with China. Americans, and particularly the American left, not the punditry, but more like Gen Z, millennials, and online cultural left, are suddenly becoming very aware of the larger implications of the United States. And it's interesting. I wrote this, and this is a quote from an article that is not about this, but it's from Substack, and I'm going to read the entire article to make sure that I actually like the person, so I'll quote them. But I did like this little piece. I didn't read the whole thing yet, but I did like this piece because it transcends. And because if you think about the whole China of it all, right? And like what's happening on TikTok, I'm feeling Chinese. You know what I mean? That thing. And remember when Red Note was having a whole thing in a moment? So I'm just going to read this. Westerners are correctly identifying some of the shortcomings of their countries. We know that. Their fears and longings remain unorganized and unfocused. And most importantly, disconnected from the broader global struggle. This is the key part I want you to lock in on, leading them to form leading them to the form of passive rebellion they are most familiar with, consumption. And that got me. So I was like, oh, this is interesting. Consumption, right? Anytime, like, how did this sort of happen? Where, because I've been thinking about the left as a whole. And of course, there's the whole race of it, which we're, you know, if we actually confront the anti-Black racism equation, and we actually stand a chance. But there's something here, right? The passive form of rebellion, they're most familiar with consumption. Like, and that's how it's been sold on the left. If you buy tickets to my show and I'm transgender, you support trans liberation. No, you fucking don't. No, you just bought a ticket to my show and it's probably going to be mid. Right? If you care about Black history, then you'll buy these t-shirts. You'll support that. There's a thing where it's like, that's the participation. Or because I do think it's interesting because it's mass mobilization, which is the knee-jerk reaction, and the buying of things that tell you what type of person I am. And in a way, engaging in the Super Bowl, which is also a kind of consumption, is like, and now buying Bad Bunny records and albums and playing them and wearing Bad Bunny merch or whatever. These things are now going to be like synonymous with, I support migrants or I support immigrants or I'm not like you. And those are things that we should actively try not to do because it doesn't do what we think it does. At the same time, until there's what you're not going to hear me say is you're stupid or you're this or you're that. It's like, no, this should be celebrated as a kind of, but I don't think it's a capital dub. I think it's like a little baby dub that ends 2 days after it happens. Do you get what I'm saying? I'm just going to end with Puerto Rico, like here, which is to say, it's been more than a century since it's been acquired by the United States. And the status of it as like a U.S. territory, still kind of nebulous. You can't vote from Puerto Rico if you're Puerto Rican. And again, I want you to think about the level of poverty, right? That's there, that an American citizen that isn't allowed to vote fully unless they live specifically here, which is only specific to Puerto Ricans. But in order to really understand the history of that island, you'd have to understand more about the Caribbean and the way that the Atlantic slave trade informed the Caribbean, which informed the Atlantic slave trade, which informed chattel slavery here in America, and was truly a matter of where the boat stopped. But that's a different conversation for another day. I think we brought up enough things. But again, the citizenship of it all. So what I'll do is there's a place my brain is trying to go that I haven't been able to go yet. So I believe it's almost there. So I'll take you there because there's so much to talk about. And I'm all of this has to do with race. That's the thing that's like all of this, like, do you think this would be happening? Do you think this would be happening if fucking Bad Bunny looked like Benny Blanco? You know what I mean? Or if he sounded like no, it wouldn't. It wouldn't. This is racially charged. It's the same kind of thing, but they're turning race into a culture war, right? A culture like this is I'm not against these people of this race, even though I'm saying racist things, I believe racist things, and I would typecast everybody for doing it, right? Everybody for being part of that racial identity. But it's about American culture and tradition. So in not talking about race, we're actually letting them completely control the narrative of it. And because most people with a white sensibility are inclined to think about race culturally, because then whether or not who they are as a person is not in question when it's culturally, even though it shouldn't be in question regardless. That's where people go. So I'm sitting with this. I think it was hugely informative. We need to be really careful about how we treat and engage this because consumption is the American response, which is, see? And I get it. It feels like control. And honestly, I saw the shift happen from Frederick Douglass to Booker T. Washington in studying this, which I'll talk about more, but it's basically like, there was so much political violence. There was so much murder in the 3 years that followed Black people taking office in America through votes. There was so much murder, white people murdering Black people, anyone they could find, and particularly anybody who dared want to vote, was a proponent of voting, moved into the wrong area. whatever you want to call it, that by the time Booker T. Washington came around, he was just like, oh, you're going for this or the office and political power. You should just be owning land and blah, blah, blah. And, it wasn't wrong. It just wasn't right either. But there's something that, to me, I saw it as the strategy that we all do, which is, okay, I have to go to like what I can control. And what we often can control is we think, oh, well, my dollars, right? Which is why one of the knee-jerk reactions online has been like, we just boycott. Oh, and don't forget, I sat down with Omar Barghouti, like one of the architects of the BDS movement, who was just like, it was impactful. And then it wasn't, because everybody just kept adding to the list. And like, people can't just do that. You have to choose singular targets. And it's a years and years and years and years and years and years long endeavor. And it is, but our memory isn't that long anymore. And our responses are just like our memory, like that of a goldfish, where it's like every 7 seconds there's a new thing. Anyway, we're getting somewhere. I can feel that we're getting somewhere. We did have to bold the Super Bowl in. It was too big of a moment. I don't get it, but woke fucking won, y'all. Like woke won. Now we just have to keep shoring up our language and our abilities to like interpret, decipher what's happening politically, and also like letting go of what doesn't, like, the perniciousness and the evil of racism. Yeah. But the dummies who are championing it, fully on the fucking table. Imagine calling Jay-Z a diversity. Imagine that Jay-Z did better than you in every conceivable way at a time when you were guaranteed success as like a gritty, dirty white guy. That even though, and fucking Green Day, like, that's my band. Those are my fucking people. It opens up with Green Day. No mention of Green Day. No mention of Green Day. These people don't want America. They want homeland. They want homeland. And it's about time that got clarified. So anyway, I love you all very much. I'm really looking forward to tomorrow's episode. Thank you, Corey, for making us look good, sound good. Thanks for joining me on our breakdown of the Super Bowl. Bad Bunny is very sexy, and they're very mad about it. They're very, very mad about it. But woke one, y'all. Love you and can't wait. Cannot wait for our next episode of Dark Woke. Mwah.